We lost $250,000 last month due to turnover. But one of the things that I've found is that AI is a very transcendental term that is used incorrectly, something that we had to develop over time. Gen Z really values that.
Hey Trent, how you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm awesome. So great to have you join us today. I'm looking forward to this discussion. I'm sure it's going to be exciting and dynamic.
I have to say, I love your podcast title. That's very intriguing. Definitely would make me stop whenever I see the title.
Well, great, because we're all boss decoding, right? We're trying to figure
Right.
it out. We're trying to figure out
Yeah.
our bosses. We're trying to be bosses ourselves. We've been talking a lot recently about AI and what's happening in that space as far as recruitment is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know it's the future talk, right? It's already here. How would
Right.
you define the real impact on recruiting today, beyond the noise and the hype? And what do you see happening in that space?
All right, let me take a second. I'm going to redirect because I think that we need to create a baseline. I noticed whenever I've been talking about AI in recruiting and HR since 2019, 2020. I love technology that enables me to be a little lazy but look really efficient. So when AI started peeping its head, I'm like, oh, I'm all in. Like, how do I get in on this? But one of the things that I've found is that AI is a very transcendental term that is used incorrectly sometimes. So if I can just create that baseline so that way when we're talking about AI, we're using the right terminology. Is that cool?
Yep, that sounds great.
Awesome. All right. So let's start. Just think of three different buckets. All right. You have your automation, Gen AI, and agentic. All right. Looking at automation, think of this as do this for me. It's programmatic. If this, then that. So if you're in an HR system, it's as soon as I trigger this status, it automatically sends an email to the employee notifying them of X, Y, and Z. That's automation. All right. You can kind of set it and forget it. I would encourage at least audit it once a quarter, make sure that it's working, get some feedback from the end user to make sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to. But it's kind of easily low lift, very low risk whenever you're looking at the three different buckets. Then you get into Gen AI. So think Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity, anything that is leveraging that AI assistant. So it is do this with me. So ideate with me, research with me. You have this really powerful sidekick, but you're still the one that's driving what you want that AI to do. Then we're moving into agentic AI. Do this with me. And if I tell you to, you can do this for me. So there's an autonomous aspect of it. This is kind of where we're going. I don't really see a lot of HR being very comfortable with that because in HR, I think one of the things that draws most of us is that we're just a touch on the control freak side, but there is a lot of questions and there's a lot of vulnerabilities around there now. I think that will be evened out probably over the next 3 to 5 years, but that's kind of where things are going. Whenever I hear people talking about AI, especially in HR, 60% of the time they're actually talking about automation. All right. That's not necessarily artificial intelligence. You can have AI assisted automation. So if this, then that, then engage Gen AI. But for the most part, that's usually what people feel comfortable in. And there's still a lot of runway there in terms of getting a lift and efficiency to any function with any business leveraging automation. So your question is, where do I see it impacting recruiting? I'm optimistic. Do I think is there going to be some bumps in the road? Definitely. Any new technology, you go back and you look, there's bumps in the road, right? The only issue is that they're going to come a lot faster. And if you don't have the right governance in place in the beginning, that bump is going to be a pothole. So, we all know what potholes can do to cars. I'm optimistic though.
Yeah.
If I go back and I look at my tenure, 20 something years in HR, what drew me to HR coming from the line of business was always viewed my role as being in charge of the largest expense and the largest asset producing revenue in the organization. And every decision that I made went through that lens. What bogged me down was chasing an I-9, getting this paperwork filled out. Did I move this? Did I click here? And I think that's the level that when we start leveraging these three different aspects of AI, it can lift that job into being more consultative, to being more strategic, and most importantly, to really positioning the value that the good side of HR actually brings to an organization. Because if you really want to move the needle, whether it's AI adoption, selling a new product,
Mhm.
enhancing products, or building something out, it starts and it ends with people. But the people in charge of the people have been bogged down on processes, policy, police, and all of that. So I do have a little bit more of an optimistic realm. And if you want to check out, I actually wrote an article for Fast Company. It's
Okay.
called a talent portfolio manager, and I really kind of blow out, this is my utopia. This is where I see us going, and the evolution of L&D and recruiting becoming one organization in talent. So rather than in enterprise, if I need to hire somebody internally, I go to the HRBP. If I need externally, I go to the recruiter. If I have a learning and development issue on my team, or I need to reskill them, then I go to learning and development. Well, as a hiring manager, when you're running a line of business, I did it for years before I got into HR. That's a lot to ask.
Mhm.
Why not just have one person who's in charge of talent from beginning to end, internal, external, creating apprenticeship programs within my group, helping me design learning and development and career pathing. One person. Till now, we were not able to do that. You had to have multiple FTE. If I'm looking at kind of the trajectory of where AI is going, I do think we're going to get to the point where that one person, I can be your end all be all for everything talent. And how much closer are you and I going to work? And like, we're going to be tied at the hip, because going forward, it's going to be a race for talent, even in spite of all of the changes that AI is going to have on our workforce. I'm a little excited about it, in case you couldn't tell.
You sound really excited about it, and you're making me even more excited about it. So you saying that if there's going to be a one person or one touch point
Mhm,
for all things talent, right?
mhm,
What skills do you think an HR person or a talent acquisition person right now needs to gain in
mhm.
order to be able to move into a role like that, knowing that they need to understand how AI can help them and assist them to be that one touch point?
First and foremost, um, you have to know how your business makes money. More specifically, the department or the organization within the company that you're supporting, how do they contribute to that? What are their business KPIs? So whenever
Mhm.
I got into HR, I had 3 or 4 people training me. And most of them were like, "You're never going to make it because you don't know HR law. You've never been in HR." But there was one thing that I had that they didn't, and it
Mhm.
helped me progress a lot quicker than they did. I could sit across from, most of my career before HR was in banking and finance and consulting. I could sit with the head of mortgage or the head of commercial and listen to their normal quarterly, their QBR, and I could hear, okay, we're behind on revenue, we're higher on expenses, our OpEx is a little concerning. So what that means is we're probably going to have to cut. We need to look at efficiencies, and that's going to be a reallocation of human capital over here,
Right.
right?
And
That's
you understood the business and how business has
understood the
happened.
business and
Right.
where the people were involved in that. So if you are not able to do that just like with fluency, that's
Mhm.
where you start. And this is also, I think, a missed opportunity. This is a fantastic time to really sit down with your client and show some interest in them. Not just
Mhm.
being the policy police, not just being the law, but really getting in and going, I want to dig in. Like, you say we make money here. Where's the value there? Okay,
Right.
the people that are involved there. Do you know the revenue per FTE? Or if you're on the risk side, what's the average risk in dollars that if this position is not filled, what are we
The
exposing the
cost.
company? And
Mhm.
then you can start communicating back to them rather than going, hey, I lowered your time to fill. It's, hey, I saved X amount of revenue by getting that job filled 3 weeks ahead of time.
Just had this conversation the other day on hacking HR with
Enrique?
a team of folks. Great, great, great place. And
Oh, love me some Enrique.
yeah,
That's my boy.
it's awesome, right?
Yeah.
And they're teaching a class right now on how to integrate AI into your
Mm,
career as an HR professional. And one of the things that we were talking about is being able to tell the story.
mm,
And so many HR people we get caught up in the metrics that we need and not
right.
we aren't able to translate them to what the business needs in order to understand how that impacts them. Because when you
Mhm.
say time to fill, yay, I'm glad you went down from 62 days to 23. That's awesome. But what does that mean to us? That means that you can more quickly activate. That
Mhm.
means maybe if you, like you're saying, if you're integrating everything into one training entity, then that means, from the very jump, that person's being oriented to the business. They're being
Right.
oriented to what's happening, and they're not just sitting in an HR. orientation that's about, my benefits and my, time off, but they're
Mhm.
actually learning, hey, this is how this part of the business, maybe product interacts with sales,
Right.
or this is what our mission is for the next quarter. How is my role going to actually impact that? So I think there's a great opportunity there for that type of
Yeah.
conversation.
There was an HR or kind of a CHRO that I was, she asked me to do some coaching for her, and she was struggling because she was not making, she goes, I'm going over all these metrics. I said, because they matter to you. So I got to go in and meet with the board, and I did the presentation and using her same metrics, but just put a different lead in on it. So one of the things that they were concerned about was turnover. And it was sitting at like 32% in this one particular division.
Wow.
So rather than going, our turnover increased to 32% versus whatever it was last month, I just said, we lost $250,000 last month due to turnover.
You start
What was
seeing the revenue, they understand
right,
those.
right, and immediately the question, "Well, what did it go up to?" Now I have their attention. I'm
Right.
speaking their language, and for her, it was like this big aha moment. I said, "It's all it's like a YouTube video and the Instagram stuff. They always talk about the hook. You gotta think about the hook. The hook is not what's important to HR. The hook is what's important to the business and tying it to that KPI." You
And
know
knowing your audience, right? Knowing your
absolutely.
audience. You may need to train your team the way that you're talking about from a
Yes.
metrics perspective, but when you're talking to your client, you need to treat them as a client.
Absolutely, absolutely, and this is actually, I think, a missed opportunity leveraging AI. So this is where, if let's say a listener is, Trent, I don't know anything about accounting. I don't know the difference between a debit and a credit or how to read a P&L. Fantastic. You don't need to. You go into that AI and say, here is, and just caution, don't upload everything into AI. Just
Right.
ideate with it, give it some framework. Don't say I work for ABC company and blah, but just go, I need to communicate X, Y, and Z in terms that the C suite value. Here are some of the KPIs of an organization. If you were to advise me on how to present my information to this organization, considering the KPIs, what would it be? And just go toe to toe with it.
That's a
And
great framework.
it's a great way to kind of train yourself. And I tell people all the time, if you've got like on my personal Mac, I have like the ChatGPT app and the Claude app, and I like AI, but I always turn on the voice thing because I'll
Yeah.
actually go back and forth with it and go, well, this, and it'll shoot holes in it and go, okay, so should I redirect here? And there are times that I realize that I talk to AI more than I talk to humans
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I
I feel
like
the
to
same
learn.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think that, if you're sitting and you're listening and you're going, I don't know how to make that leap, that's where you can start leveraging AI to enhance how you communicate, how you present the value and establish that value. Because there is nothing that sends me over the edge more than whenever an HR person says, I deserve a seat at the table. I am sorry. Everyone sitting at that table, they earned it.
That's
You need
right.
to as well.
And you need to show
Yep.
what the value that you add. So you
Mhm.
said something interesting just then that made me think about the fact that we are talking, some of us are talking more to AI than we are to humans, right?
Mhm.
And that trust element with AI and making sure that you are challenging AI when you do hear a position that doesn't sound quite right. Can
Right.
you speak to that?
I'm actually going to take it a little bit more broad.
Okay.
Anytime there's data, like mine are statistics and finance, my job at ISIMS, head of talent insights, I'm in workforce data all day long, every day, because I like data. I can trust it.
Mhm.
But I always tell people I have a rule. I interrogate the data. I don't just take it for what it is. I will take it and go and compare it to other data points. And I think that whenever you're working with AI, that's something that you need to do as well. And it's a skill that you have to develop. Some people call it being cynical. It kind of walks a line, but before I go and put my name behind some data, I want to make sure that
Mhm.
I've tested it, because I'll get media questions on it, and I don't like to be backed into a corner. I didn't like to be backed into a corner whenever I had to go to a deposition to represent the company. So I wanted to make sure that I had all the different angles in my head and I felt secure with that data because I had interrogated it. AI is the same way. Make
It's
sure that you interrogate it.
interrogating, asking the tough questions. So a
And
lot of
and
folks,
and but just to kind of, let's double click a little bit more on that question of the end intent.
mhm,
if someone heard ask that question, they're like, oh, well, we're going to be even less social than we were before cell phones and texting and social media. Yes, but let me challenge that a little bit. So at my previous company, I was in the C-suite and I put them through DISC, I put them through Strength Finders. And I mean, this was 2023, late 2023, early 2024. So I got their permission. I put all of it into a knowledge base for like a GPT. I didn't use Chat GPT. I used something else, but just for clarity. So I
Mhm.
went in and I basically said, you have this as your knowledge base. Only use your knowledge base. Any question that is asked, ask for the name of the individuals that are involved before you answer. So
Mhm.
I could go in and I can go, hey, I am meeting with John. I've got to go over this very delicate issue where he's not performing. Can you give me some advice? John is who I'm talking to. My name is Trent. So it would go and it would pull all of that different personality, the strength, the communication styles, all of that together. And I could go in and ensure that I was speaking to John in the way that John wanted to be spoken to. So
Spoken
that
to.
way I made sure that my message landed correctly.
Yeah.
So let's not discount, oh, we're talking to AI, we're not going to be able to talk to people. I think if you do it correctly, it can actually be a fantastic coach. Again, it can
Yeah.
be that sidekick that goes, hey, Trent, you're very bottom line.
Yeah.
John's going to want you to ask, how was this weekend? How are his kids? Develop that thing before just diving in. My natural proclivity is just to get right to the point. Hey, how are you? Good. Cool. This is what I need. That tells John,
I'm
according to
over here with that same proclivity.
yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, and it was funny because a lot of our employees were in Latin America, and they're very collectivistic,
Like,
and
mhm.
it's something I love about them. But I really had to change how I communicated. So I had a little post-it note that says, "Ask them how they are." So anytime I open Slack, hey, how was your weekend? Da, da, da. And I found over time I enjoyed it because I got to know them. I got to know them and understand a little bit more how they tick. So technology can be an inhibitor, but it can also be something that will enhance your relationships if you leverage it correctly.
I keep thinking about the fact that we all had to give up our admins. About 15 years ago, it was like, you don't need admins anymore. And it's like,
Yeah,
we're so lucky because we have AI now. And it's like having an admin again, right? Who says, hey, did you
absolutely.
remember to send flowers? Did you remember to, say what Trent's favorite thing is or what his husband's name is or
Yeah,
whatever? It's those
yes.
types of things that just help you to be a little more human, right?
Yeah,
I find that it has helped me a lot with I'm very straightforward. And so when it comes to writing emails to soften just a little bit, hey, give me a little more of
fluff.
Forbes Riley, right?
Fluff it
Help
up
me
for
be
me.
a little less analytical and to say,
Yeah.
hey, um, let me soften the way that I'm giving this
Mhm.
information, especially if it's information that may be disappointing, or if I'm trying to. I was reading some emails that I wrote maybe about 4 years ago, and I just happened to pop across them, and I was like, "Man, that was brutal." And I didn't think it was brutal. I thought it was really, I'm just giving them the facts. But
Yes.
then when you read back, and you're like, "You didn't, but you straight no chaser, huh?" You just,
Yep. One of my, God rest her soul, Miss Mary. So I was running a region for a bank, several different branches, and Miss Mary used to be a branch manager. She didn't want to do it anymore, and so she was kind of like my right hand person. And I remember I had it was a fairly decent sized office, and I had this L-shaped credenza, and I always kept snacks because I have low blood sugar, so I would always keep like crackers and things like that in case I forgot to eat. I had something there that way I wouldn't become a different person. And I was working late one Thursday or Friday, and she comes in and she just starts opening up different things in my credenza. And I looked at her, I said, Miss Mary, what are you doing? She goes, oh, you didn't notice? I always on Saturdays, if you're low on crackers, I get your crackers, I get this. She did it so like she knew that was something I needed. She didn't want any kind of praise for it. And there were so many times that people would call and go, I need to talk to the VP. I'm like, well, you're talking to the VP. And they're like, no, 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 it was a lady. I go, Miss Mary, line one's for you. And I was okay with that because
yeah,
she and I worked so closely together. She knew my decision making framework and I
right,
trusted her emphatically. Now let's fast forward to today. Yes, you can have an AI assistant that can help you with all that stuff, but you need to take the time to train it.
train it. That's right.
This is where you can go outside of the lines. This is where I want you to go and pull in additional information. And if you pull in additional information, I only want it from these sources.
Sources, right.
Yeah, don't go pull
Use
in.
this tone of voice when you're talking to people. This is
Yes.
my style of communication.
Yeah.
Just helping AI to be a little more personalized
Yeah.
with you. And
Yeah.
you just gave me a note that your background is Southern. You said Miss Mary. I just love that. I think I thought I was the only one guilty of that.
No.
I call all my clients if we're about the same age or a little bit older.
Right.
Miss Paula, Miss Lena.
Oh, she was a sweetheart, and she would get so embarrassed when I go line one for you, and they're like, she goes, "I didn't tell them." I said, "Mary, I don't care. That's one less problem I have to solve." And 9 times out of 10, it was like 16 pages of paperwork to get something, and she loved that. I suck at that, so we just played on each other's strengths, and I will never forget that because we had such a symbiotic relationship. And I'm looking at, AI in the workforce, and I think that's the point that's being missed.
Yes.
If we look at that augmentation, that symbiotic relationship, think of our entry-level workers, okay? We've all placed them. If you've worked or spent any time in recruiting, you go and you get these wonderful college graduates, and what happens? They get put in the filing room because they have to serve their time.
Right.
But then we look at the cost that before we start attributing any kind of revenue or any kind of production or efficiencies as a result of hiring these new college grads, it's a very long ramp up. What I see companies doing now is they're cutting that entry level and say, we'll just give it to AI. I want to kind of propose a little bit more of a symbiotic, more of an augmentated approach to that. Bring that person in, let them use AI as an assistant, as a co-pilot, and then you're going to see that ramp up time. That runway is going to be a lot shorter than it was before, and you are building that internal pipeline for the needs that you're going to have in the future, because Gen Z and those that are coming out of college, they're used to the technology. They're actually really attuned to soft skills, which is something that's been missing in the last 2 generations, myself included. Something that we had to develop over time. Gen Z really values that. So using the Miss Mary that was back in the day, looking at what's going on today, I do think that we're missing an opportunity in the workforce to really bring that new workforce in and do it at a level that their runway to profitability and providing some actionable value to the organization is going to be shortened.
I totally agree with that. And the other thing is that we will lose institutional knowledge if
Oh
we
yeah.
don't bring folks in to transition them into what's our succession plan, right? We're like,
Oh,
oh yeah, we don't need them. Okay, well then who's going to know what to do when everybody's gone?
yeah.
And AI, we talk about generative AI. AI is only as good as the information that's in there, right? And so there has to be that creative human element that continues. And I
Mhm.
think we've forgotten that. We get a little excited about how that's going to, if we cut these budgets right now, yeah, but long term, you're going to be hurting your organization. And the other thing is that AI is communal, right?
Yeah.
So everybody has access to the information that is there. And
Mhm.
so that means that you have to have something that still keeps you a differentiator for your
Right.
organization. And sometimes that's the people that you're hiring. So keep that in mind. There's a lot of folks who are really nervous about this AI revolution, and they're
Mm.
thinking this is the end of talent acquisition. I, in fact, read an article a couple of months ago that said we'll replace talent acquisition in the next 6 months with AI. And it's like,
In what parallel universe?
and so if you could speak to that and why that's not a realistic assumption.
All right, let's rather than tackling TA, would you let's just kind of use a perfect example. Car buying. Think of how many just buy it online. You don't have to test drive it. You don't have to talk to anyone. You can get approved. It can be delivered to you. Think of the percentage of the population that's actually maximizing and leveraging that. And it's been around for 10 years or more, right? There are certain decisions or rites of passage in life that will remain distinctive human. All right. Moving jobs is one of those. That's a big deal because one of the things that I would always tell recruiting teams is don't underestimate the impact that you're having on this individual, their family, their community, and generational. There were so many people, and I can think of 4 or 5 right off the top of my head, and I get emotional just thinking about them. they were so underpaid in the market, and like I went and fought to get them into the organization, never told the hiring manager how little they were making, and
Mhm.
to have them cry on the phone of going, "Oh my God, like you changed my life," you know? So that part is distinctive human. That there's always going to be a need for that. Now, will we need someone that goes and processes the paperwork, double checks the paperwork, chases down an I-9, goes back and reschedules an 8-panel interview because you need 8 people to interview someone? Can that part be done by
Yeah,
AI? Absolutely.
absolutely.
And this whole talk track of AI is going to replace HR, it's going to replace TA, because I always pick on TA first.
That's why I said TA, because
Yeah, but the same could be said for L&D. You
yeah.
know, do you need 16 FTE to be able to develop content for a 700, 800 member organization? No, you don't. That content creation has been lessened on both the front end and the back end, but there's still that.
Somebody's gathering the information, somebody's understanding the business to actually funnel it to a
Yes,
content creator, and
yes,
all those things. Somebody's helping people to understand what they need to share,
yes.
and helping AI to understand what needs to be shared. So there's opportunity. It's about evaluating each job, I think, in our space and
Hmm.
saying, how can we augment and enhance the job? What are the bottlenecks that you face in your role before?
Hmm.
And now you have this opportunity to have an extra set of arms that you always said you needed, right?
Yes.
And now they're there.
Well, and this is where, kind of pulling in some design thinking, this is where you need to sit down and use a journey map, whether it's employees, hiring managers, candidates, whatever the persona is. You need to go and look at all the different touch points. Get down to the granular. And then
Mhm,
at each step say, does this need to be human? Yes or no? If
mhm,
no, should we automate or augment?
mhm. Oh,
And if we augment, should it be with Gen AI, or should this be something that goes completely agentic? So if it goes completely agentic, how we run this through our risk model to really determine, is this something that we should totally hand over hands free, or should there still be a human in the loop 60% of the time? So
right.
it's a decision tree that you go through each step of the process, and you come out of it going, okay, here are the things that are distinctively human. I can communicate that to my workforce. Here's what your job is going to evolve to. Over
Mhm,
time, we're going to start taking these things away, but don't worry, because we have data in our August 2025 workforce report that I love. It actually looked at where are TA organizations seeing the highest ROI, and then what are they doing with this extra time.
mhm,
So it was in that screening and the assessment and the interview scheduling is where they're seeing the highest ROI. And when asked, what are you doing with this extra time that is being saved as a result of leveraging AI or automation? It was spending more time with candidates in a deeper interview, developing stronger relationships and strategy with my hiring managers, followed by actually looking at my metrics and trying to figure out, how do I get better? And are they aligned with the business KPIs? And
right.
if you look at those top two things, that is what, for 20 plus years, every business leader that I supported said, I want more of this. I don't care about your processes. I need more of this.
Mhm.
Now we're entering into the time where we can be elevated.
Right. We're consultants again, right?
Yes.
We're having an opportunity to actually consult the business, look at what the market strategy is, understand who our competitors are. Like you're saying, that's really important. And I love the idea of a journey map to do that. So, what do you think about need to revisit that journey after you have seen, or an evaluation period? So, I've seen some
Ooh.
organizations actually use agentic models for screening, and I've seen the screening tools, and then I'm like, you missing. There's some gaps here.
Ooh, inspect what you expect if you're doing it on the screening. Unless, like our approach is that we don't necessarily use it for screening or anything else like that, but we do compare what the candidate provides against the job description and just says, here's a match. But the recruiter is the one that can go in and say, oh, I can see how you came up with that score, but actually
Mhm.
this, and they can do it. It's just another level, but the human is still the one that's actually making the decision. Handing that piece completely off to automation, I think that, or AI, I think that's where you're going to get into some serious risk. The risk level is significantly higher.
Higher. Mhm.
So, depending on the level. So automation, I would check probably every 6 months at the worst. Once a quarter is probably good. If you're leveraging any kind of Gen AI, a lot of that's going to be assistant work and things like that. Definitely check it. More so check the human that's involved with that. Are they prompting it correctly? Are they using it
Right.
correctly? Judge it on the output, but then that's going to tell you where some of the gaps are on the human side of it. And if you're using agentic anywhere in business, I would check it almost bi-weekly. I mean, they're
Mhm.
automate the reports, do that bias checking, do that output checking, and stay very, very, very close to it. Because what I see happening a lot is you drop agentic AI in like the Midas touch, and it's not yet. Will it be in the next several years? I think maybe there's a good chance. I don't know. I don't like looking into the future anymore and making predictions because things are moving so
Thinking too
quickly.
fast.
Yeah, if you told me in 2023 that we would be at the level that we are in 2026, I would have said, come on
Yeah,
now.
right,
I
sure.
mean, I can't get this thing to write me something that doesn't use tapestry and landscape, two words that I don't use in my normal vernacular.
Mhm.
Now, I've got, you would have to take AI out of my cold dead hand because it makes me so incredibly efficient.
Yeah,
And ironically, I find that I spend more time being human because I'm leveraging AI, because I
yeah,
have that free space in my head to actually go, hey, so what's going on? Catch me up.
yeah, yeah, you do, definitely. I totally agree with that. So I was just listening and thinking a little bit about the differences and finding that sweet spot for you as a professional and saying, hey, this is the direction that I'd like to take in the HR field.
Mhm.
Where do you see the most growth, and where do you see the risk of taking a certain route?
Mm. Um, if you're looking at very operational process driven roles, that I think would probably have a little bit a slightly higher risk over time, not in the immediate future, but over time. I do think that there's going to be even an evolution in that. So you may not be processing the paperwork, but you might be responsible for agency and orchestration of the frameworks, whether it's automation or AI, handling those processes. So, how do you take that industry, we call it knowledge, and how do you elevate it to where it can actually become something that you're using to govern, to make sure that these new technologies that are being put in place are actually
Mhm.
doing it efficiently? So it's not necessarily, oh, I just need to get out of operations because my job's going to be eliminated. Some of that may or may not be true, but how do you take what you're doing and move that institutional knowledge up to where you can be that consultant that's managing those agents, that automation, that AI, and kind of being that orchestrator? Where the real value, I think, we're going to see a double down on, going to be on advising on talent. You're still going to need to be able to mitigate risk. So with employee relations and things like that. But even some of that, I think there's a huge level. If we look at, I mean, both of us have spent time in HR. If we go back and we look at large enterprise organizations, most of the time it was an inverted funnel, which always drove me crazy. You had all of these employee relations, you had all of these operations, and then you had a little bitty TA. And I would always say, if we could flip that triangle, we could be more selective on the front and we wouldn't need all the employee relations at the
Exactly.
end, right?
Exactly.
So if we look at why you have so many employee relations, is because there's so many different avenues and aspects of employee relations. It's not just hire and fire. There's coaching, there's development, there's strategic aspect of it. But was never a common knowledge base. Go to the policy handbook.
Hmm.
All right. Well, I interpret it this way. How do you interpret it? There is, I think, something that can sit there that can kind of be that central brain, that common brain that helps streamline how employee relations is done. So the value of that is still going to be high, but I think the need for FTE is going to be significantly lower. What we need is consultants. What the business leaders need is, this is how AI is going to impact my workforce and my processes over the next 18 months. What do I do? That's going to be the value. That person that could be very multifaceted, pull in the strategy aspect of it, pull in the consulting, but also pull in, here's kind of the precedents that we've used. Here's some learning and development, really kind of being that generalist that helps them be able to meet the needs of this ever changing, what's the common thing ever changing, or demystify the ever changing evolution in this landscape, some malarkey like that. But I mean, there is something there. I think that's really where the value is going to be, is in the more human parts and less on the policy and less on the process.
Isn't it funny how we flip back to generalist and that you need that skill set? And we were
Oh
all
yeah.
told, you don't need a generalist. It's like, yeah, you do. You need to be able to understand multiple things and be able to actually implement them. So
It's
as
one of the
opposed to
benefits of having ADD is that I was forced to be a generalist because I
couldn't focus on.
couldn't focus on anything. But I knew, if it was a policy question, I knew generally, but if it was something I needed to get into, I always had someone on my team that loved doing research on policy. I'm like,
Right.
hey, Jamie, can you go check this out and report back to me? Yeah, cool. Again, playing to people's strengths.
Right.
If I had an AI assistant, that would be it. It's like, pull me all the different policy points that have with this. Let me review them, and I'm going to talk to you about it, about what my strategy should be.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. So knowing that it's going to level the playing field a little bit for us, and it's going to shift how we actually and reimagine how we actually do business in the HR space. What do you think about it reinforcing old biases? And if we're not careful, what's your perspective on that?
Oh, this is where you need to have a governance framework on the front end. All right. At iSIMS, we actually spent a lot of time before really kind of building out all this wonderful AI. We spent a lot of time on our responsible AI governance framework, and it has, including accountability, including an overseeing council. And we went and we had it audited by a third party to say, yeah, this is best in class. So we knew that anything that we created was running through that. At least we knew that it was being compliant with all the regulations that are out there. And that's what our clients require of it. So, if you're interested, you can go to the iSIMS channel, look at Fireside Chat, go look at Responsible AI. It's about a 20-minute conversation that I have with Eric, and he outlines it. And the reason I'm pointing you there is because how we're approaching it is pretty transcendental. You can apply it in any aspect of the organization. So you have to have that first before putting something in and then going, oh crap, now we got some bias. Well, if you had the governance framework on the front end and then kind of justified the tool or the process that you want to use against that framework, it will help you be able to mitigate, not all, but some of the potential bias landmines that are sitting in front of you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, definitely have to share those insights with our listeners. So we're getting close to our hour, or our 45 minutes. I know, crazy. I feel like we've been talking for 10 minutes.
I know.
It's been such an amazing conversation. If you could leave leaders with one insight about the future of AI in the talent space, and they must act on now, what would that be?
Have the hard conversations now. Brene Brown talks about, in the absence of fact, our brain creates stories. And I think that if we were to poll the workforce about their fears regarding AI, it's because there's a gap in information. If I was running a heavily processed department and I knew that, I've been in the senior level meetings, we're talking about how we're going to automate some of this. If I come to you and say, look, in the next 18 months, this job is going to change a lot. Here's some of the gaps that I see from you getting from here to there. I want to just go headlong in the next 6 months. Let's find other opportunities in the organization where you can do some cross training. Is there an apprenticeship? Are there some LinkedIn learning things? Something, to get them ready for that workforce, for that shift. Because the life of me, whenever I'm looking at the data, I'm going, everything's pointing to we've got to change. There's going to be this huge number of jobs that are going to be eliminated as a result of AI, but it's also going to add this many jobs over here. But it seems like no one's talking about how do we take the people that are affected here and put them over there. Can you go from being laid off government worker to here's on the brain, because we just released our insights on healthcare industry, and there's a nursing shortage. Can you go from that to that in 60 days? No, you can't. But if I was in that job and I knew in the next 18 months that, I'm probably going to be strongly affected, and I see, nursing, they have a lot of openings. I've always really been interested. Maybe I don't want to go RN. Maybe I want to go LPN. Can you do a 2-year degree at a community college to get that done? Absolutely.
And if you already have a degree, you may be able to even shorten that time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But those kinds of conversations are not being had. So if you're a leader, You owe it to these people who come in daily and work and blood, sweat, tears, stress, and love pouring into that position. You owe it to them to have that very strong conversation of, this is what the future is going. Here's how I think I can get you there. Are you interested? If not, then let me find something. Let me help. That's the joy of being a leader, is to, I call it putting an imprint. You know, if you've ever walked on a sidewalk or something, you always see like handprints. Those
Right.
handprints that are put in there, they could have been 20 years old. That was a
Right.
moment in time. This is your time to imprint on your workers, on your team members, and affect their trajectory for the positive. But you have to get over this is going to be a difficult situation.
Right. Right. No, I totally agree with that, Trent. And I wish that more leaders would start to quell their own fears, because I think that's
Mhm.
what's also happening, is that they're
Very.
afraid too. What does that mean for me? What does that mean for? And it's like, we're constantly shifting and evolving. At one point, we all were riding in buggies.
Right.
And now we're not, right? And
Mhm.
so things shifted, but it can be a positive shift.
It can be. And there have been people, leaders in my life that have pushed me. One in particular I always talk about her, Sibylla. Whenever she took over my division, I had worked with her. She was on the client side, and then she came over into HR, and she was running talent and development. And my first meeting with her as my boss, she says, I want you to understand how I define leadership. My job is to make you so uncomfortable, you're forced to grow. And let me tell you, she is one person in my career that made true on it. Like, there were times I will kill myself versus giving up on something. But there was one project that she put me in charge of. And I said, Sibylla, I think I'm way beyond my skis. She goes, you are. So how are you going to survive? Like, it reminds me of the great When You Burn the Boats. you know, there's no way out. We're going forward, and that's what she did
Right.
for me. And I am so much better because of it. Just want to encourage, if you're leading a team, this is your time to really lead. And you never know how that's going to reverberate over history, over generations, but have that conversation now.
I love that you were vulnerable enough to say that to your leader. And I wish more people were able to be that vulnerable, and that their leaders were accepting of it and say, hey, I wouldn't have put you in this role if I didn't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
So that, to me, that's a great to ending our conversation. I have
Okay.
one other thing that I'd like to ask you. Tell
Okay.
my audience what amazing things that you're working on and what we can do to support Trent Cotton.
Oh, awesome. So, my day job, which is kind of a dream, I get to hang out in data. I get to do thought leadership. I get to hang out with our product team and our sales team. Make sure that you go follow the LinkedIn newsletter. I have one on my personal LinkedIn, and we also have one for iCIMS. And every month we do a free, let me say that again, free workforce report that we put out monthly. And whenever I was a practitioner, I was always looking for external data that I could benchmark. Like, yeah, I decreased my time to fill from 37 to 32, but I didn't know what was going on in the market.
Right.
That's what we provide. So we look at openings, we look at application volume, we look at hires, but we also go into different sectors and different topics. We also do anchor reports. So last year was CHR report and state of frontline hiring. Coming in March, we're actually looking at true data driven. Like, we're doing surveys, we're doing research. We partner with Aptitude on this particular project, and we're looking at AI adoption in TA. What is that percentage? And then what is it by each stage of the process? So make sure that you go and you sign up for that, because we put out a ton of content, and we really try to be very strong strategic partners for our clients, and also for the industry. And if you like to hear me yap, you can go to look up Human Capitalist. I have a podcast, bring on fantastic guests, and really just kind of iron out what's going on really whenever it comes to AI's impact on the workforce and how are people solving for it. So I think that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Right. Well, we will definitely put the link in bottom of our screen, and make
Awesome.
sure that folks the insight. And we thank you again, Trent Cotton, for joining us today. What a fantastic conversation. I
Thank
don't know
you.
how the audience is feeling, but I feel like I learned so much. And thanks again, Trent.
Awesome. Really appreciate it.